My name is Adrienne Calloway. I am 41 years old. I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Air Force. I have served for 16 years. I have been stationed in 4 countries, received 2 commendations I am not permitted to discuss publicly, and I have been, since the age of 7, the only person in my family who was ever expected to handle anything difficult. That is not a compliment. I used to think it was. I grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. My father is Raymond Calloway, 63 years old, retired city comptroller, deacon at First Baptist, the kind of man who shakes hands with both of his hands and speaks at other people's retirement parties and funerals with the practiced warmth of someone who has never once in his life been asked to be uncomfortable. My mother is Beverly. She is kind in the way that water takes the shape of whatever container it's poured into. She loves me. I have never once doubted that she loves me. But she has been married to Raymond Calloway for 38 years, and in that time, she has learned that love and action are two completely separate things. My brother is Terrence. He is 4 years younger than me. He is the baby. He is the son. He is the one who got the savings account at 18, the down payment on his first apartment at 22, the car at 16 with the full insurance policy, and the constant quiet financial current that ran from my father's account to Terrence's lifestyle like it was simply the natural order of things. Terrence and I were close when we were children. He had a good heart. He genuinely did. But good hearts can be buried under years of being told that you are the one who deserves, and I watched that happen to my brother slowly, the way you watch a plant grow toward whichever window has the light. His good heart was still in there somewhere. I believed that then. I still believe it now. It just hadn't made a real appearance in about 15 years. I had, over the course of my adult life, contributed to the stability of Terrence's existence in ways that were never framed as contributions. They were framed as family, as obligation, as what you do. I had covered a car repair in 2014. I had helped with 2 months of rent in 2018. I had sent money 3 times for reasons I was given that I later found out were not entirely accurate. I had never been asked whether I wanted to do any of it. I had never said no. That is a thing about being the reliable one. Nobody asks. They don't have to. I met my husband James at a conference in Seattle 9 years ago. He was a structural engineer, the kind of quiet, observant man who notices the weight-bearing walls in every room he walks into, literally and otherwise. He had steady hands and a way of listening that made you feel like what you were saying was the only thing happening in the world at that moment. He asked me 3 minutes into our first real conversation what I found most challenging about my work. Not what I did. What I found hard about it. Nobody had ever asked me that before. I told him the truth. That surprised both of us. We were engaged 14 months later. I called my father the evening after James proposed. I was sitting on the back steps of our apartment in Colorado Springs, watching the mountains go pink in the late sun. I told him we had set a date. I told him the ceremony would be in Savannah, Georgia, at a venue that James and I had visited twice before we booked it. I told him that nothing would mean more to me than having him walk me down the aisle. He said he'd have to look at his calendar. I should have understood everything in that moment. I didn't. The way you don't understand things that have been obvious for years. You only understand them later, all at once, from a distance, with the particular ache of someone who let hope do too much of their thinking. The invitations went out in February. The wedding was June 7th, a Saturday. Late afternoon, outdoor ceremony, dinner reception at the Whitmore Estate in Savannah, a place with Spanish moss and old live oaks and a courtyard that made James's mother stand very still when she first walked through it and say, quietly, "This is exactly right," which is how I knew it was. We reserved 4 rows for family, mine and his. White satin ribbons tied to the aisle chairs. A small printed card, reserved, family of the bride. By April, I had received RSVPs from James's entire family. His parents, his 2 brothers, both sisters-in-law, his aunt and uncle who drove from Michigan, his college roommate who James's mother personally invited because, she said, he's basically ours. From my immediate family, nothing. I called my mother in May. She said they were planning to come. She said my father's back had been bothering him and the drive from Baton Rouge was long. I said I would book them flights. She said that wasn't necessary. She just needed to confirm the timing. I said, of course. She said she'd get back to me. She did not get back to me. I called again 2 weeks before the wedding. She said they were sorting out the details. I said, Mom, I just need to know if I should have the venue hold the seats or release them. She said, honey, we love you so much. You know that, don't you? I said yes. I hung up. I knew, in the way you know things you are not ready to say out loud, that they were not coming. I kept that knowledge in a locked room in my chest and did not let it out because letting it out would have made it real, and I had 16 years of training in managing the difference between what you feel and what the situation requires. The morning of June 7th, I put on my dress uniform, looked at myself in the mirror in the bridal suite, and called my father. He didn't answer. I called my mother. She answered on the third ring. Her voice had the careful, managed warmth of a woman conducting a conversation she has been dreading. She said, Adrian, sweetheart. She said, your father's back. She said, it's just too much travel right now. I said, Mom, are you coming? Silence. The specific silence that is not the absence of an answer, but is itself the answer, dressed in quiet. She said, we love you so much. I said, I know. I hung up. I stood in front of the mirror for 45 seconds. Full dress uniform. Every decoration in its correct position. 16 years of service visible on my chest. Hair done the way I had practiced it 4 times the previous week. A woman who had earned everything she wore. About to walk down an aisle alone. I picked up my bouquet. White peonies and pale greenery. James had chosen the flowers because I had told him once, years earlier, that I thought peonies were the most honest flower. They open completely or not at all. I walked out of the bridal suite. I walked down that aisle in front of 160 people with 4 empty rows on my left side. I made it through the ceremony. I made it through dinner. I danced with James, with his father, who said nothing but held my hand very firmly during the dance, which was enough. With his older brother, who told 3 terrible jokes and watched carefully to make sure I laughed. With his mother, who at the end of the night held my face in both of her hands and said, you are ours. You understand me? Completely and permanently ours. I made it to the hotel bathroom at 11:47 p.m. before I sat down on the cold tile floor and sobbed until I couldn't see straight. Then I washed my face. I went to bed. I lay awake for an hour watching the ceiling move through darkness. James's hand found mine in the dark. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The text came at 7:52 the next morning. James was still sleeping. I had been awake since 6, holding my phone, not because I expected anything specific, but because some part of me, the 9-year-old part, the part that still believed my father was the man he performed for other people, was waiting for an apology. I saw his name on the screen. My chest did something involuntary. The specific physical sensation of hope showing up uninvited. I opened the message. Adrian, your brother is in a situation with a venue deposit for his engagement party. It's $12,000 and the deadline is this Friday. You've always been the steady one in this family. Let us know what you can do. No congratulations. No acknowledgement. No, I'm sorry we weren't there. No, I watched you grow up and I should have been in that front row. Just a bill. The morning after my wedding, a bill for my brother's party. I did not throw the phone. I did not wake James. I opened my banking app. I pulled up the transfer function. I entered my father's account number, the one I had memorized from years of sending money without being asked. I entered the amount. $0.01. Memo. Best wishes. Sent. Blocked his number. Put the phone down. Picked up my coffee. It was the first thing I had properly tasted in 2 days. Peace lasted 6 days. I unblocked him. Old reflex. Older than I want to admit. Military training overrides a lot of things. It has never fully overridden the part of me that says, what if there's a real emergency? What if something is actually wrong? The messages came in a wall. 38 of them, stacked up like water that had been held behind something. The first several were pleading. Dad voice. The voice from childhood that used to make me want to fix whatever was wrong, whatever it cost. The middle ones were accusatory. After everything this family has sacrificed. After everything we gave up for you. You think that uniform makes you too good for us. The last ones were something I had no category for. You are a selfish, ungrateful child. You always have been. Those medals don't make you anything. You left this family a long time ago and we all know it. You have always been cold. You have always been difficult. You are your own worst problem, and one day you will understand that. I read them the way I read threat assessments. Without flinching. Cataloging. Documenting. Then I called my supervisor at the base, Major Constance Webb, 16 years in Air Force intelligence, the person in my chain of command I trusted most to give me an honest read on a situation she had no personal investment in. I told her I had a family member making escalating contact. I did not tell her about the wedding. I told her I was documenting it and wanted her aware in case it became relevant. She said, "Keep documenting. Tell me if anything changes." 3 days later, it changed. Major Webb called at 8:14 on a Tuesday morning. Her voice was in a register I recognized, the register she used when something had already happened and she was managing the information before she delivered it. She said, "Calloway, your father was outside the East Gate this morning. He spoke to personnel there. He was asking about your duty schedule, your building location, your daily arrival and departure times." I said, "Say that again." She said it again. A commissioned officer's location and schedule are not public information. There are people specifically tasked with ensuring they remain that way. What my father had done was not a family disagreement. It was a security concern. I filed a formal report that afternoon with Staff Sergeant Dale Rutherford, Base Security, who had 14 years in military law enforcement, and the specific manner of a man who has heard everything and reacts to nothing until he is ready to act. He reviewed the message documentation I had kept. He opened an incident report. He looked at me the way people look at you when rank means something. He said, "Lieutenant Colonel, this is now documented as a potential threat to the security of a service member. I want you to understand that means we treat it accordingly." I said, "I understand." He said, "Does this individual know your residential address?" James and I had a home in Savannah. It was not a secret. My father had the address from a card I had sent 2 Christmases ago. I said yes. He said, "Change your locks tonight. Get security cameras if you don't have them. I want to hear from you every 48 hours until this is resolved." That night, James installed cameras at the front and back of the house and at both gates. He did not ask me questions while he worked. When he was done, he came inside, washed his hands, and made dinner, and we ate it at the kitchen table in the way we sometimes eat when something is happening that we are both still processing, quietly together, in the particular piece of people who trust each other completely. A letter arrived at the base 2 days later, delivered to my rank and full name, which told me he had looked that up specifically. His handwriting, left slanting, the particular angles he wrote in when he was in a certain state. The letter said, "You will regret what you have done to this family. You think you are so above us. You are not above anything. You are going to be alone at the end of all of this with nothing but those decorations on your chest, and it will serve you right." I did not respond. I placed the letter in a sealed evidence bag. I logged it. I put it in the secure drawer of my desk at home, under my personal sidearm. Then I called a lawyer. Her name was Priscilla Hayward. She had been practicing family and civil harassment law in Georgia for 22 years. She had handled 14 cases involving active duty service members and civilian family harassment. She answered my call personally, which told me she took JAG referrals seriously. I told her everything, chronologically, with dates, amounts, documentation, the money I had sent over the years, the wedding they did not come to, the penny, the messages, the gate incident, the letter. She listened without interrupting. That discipline, just listening without redirecting, is rarer than people realize. She had it completely. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Lieutenant Colonel, you have 3 distinct legal threads running simultaneously. You have documented financial harassment, the request for money the morning after your wedding. You have documented threatening correspondence, the letter. And you have documented a security violation, the contact at the base gate. Individually, each of these is addressable. Together, they build something stronger. A protective order becomes very viable when you can show a pattern of escalating, intentional conduct across multiple categories. I said, I want the protective order. She said, I'll have the filing ready by Thursday. I said, there may be JAG involvement given the security component. She said, I've worked alongside JAG before. It's not a complication. It's additional support. She paused. Then she said one more thing. The penny transfer. You need to understand that was either the bravest or the most strategically exact thing you could have done, depending on how you look at it. There is a record. A timestamp. A memo. That is evidence of your state of mind. I said, I know. She said, Thursday. I was in a classified briefing when it happened. Room without windows. Monitors on. The kind of meeting where phones are supposed to be off. Mine was on silent on the table beside my notes, face down, because there are situations where I need to remain reachable regardless of the room. It began vibrating at 3:17 p.m. and did not stop. I looked at the screen under the table. Savannah area code. Savannah area code. James. Savannah area code. James's text. He's here. He's at the house. Police are already coming. Get here now. James had never texted me in all capitals in 9 years together. That mattered more than the room. I excused myself, drove the 11 minutes from base to our neighborhood in 7, and pulled onto our street to find 2 patrol cars with lights going, for neighbors standing on their lawns, James's car parked at an angle in the driveway, and my father, Raymond Gerald Calloway, 63 years old, former city comptroller, deacon at First Baptist, the most respected man in his zip code, standing on the lawn I had mowed 8 days ago, gesturing at an officer with the posture of a man explaining a profound injustice. I stepped out of my car. He saw me. He did something with his face that I had been seeing my entire life and had only recently learned to name accurately. It was the look of a man who believes he has the advantage. I've got you where I want you. I've arranged the board. The officer, a woman named Rivera, mid-30s, walked toward me with the careful stance of someone who has already heard one side of a story and isn't certain what to do with it yet. She said, ma'am, your father has filed a report claiming you conducted an unauthorized electronic transfer from his financial account. We're looking at a potential fraud complaint. Fraud. My security clearance. 16 years of service. Every classified briefing I had ever sat in. Everything I had built from a family that had never once shown up for any of it. All of it balanced on one word. I took one breath. The kind we train for. The kind designed to bring your heart rate down when raising it could cost you something. I said, Officer Rivera, is your body camera active? She said, yes, ma'am. I said, good. I opened my banking app. I pulled up the transaction history. I scrolled to June 8th, the morning after my wedding. I held the screen directly in front of her camera. I said, show me the fraud. Recipient, Raymond G. Calloway. Account number, last 4 digits visible. His account. The one he had given her as the victim account. The one he told her I had stolen from. Amount, 1 cent. Memo, best wishes. Initiated from my account. Authorized by me. Sent to him. I said, this is not fraud. This is a cent I voluntarily transferred from my account to his account, using his account number with my authorization. That is the precise legal definition of the opposite of fraud. I paused. What this is, I said, is a documented harassment campaign, and I am filing an additional report right now. Officer Rivera turned toward my father. When she spoke to him, her voice had a completely different quality than the one she had used with me. Flat. The specific flat of a law enforcement professional who has just understood they were used. She said, Mr. Calloway, the account you identified as the victim account is the recipient account. The transfer was sent to you, not taken from you. The evidence does not support the complaint you filed. My father's expression went through several stages. First, certainty. Then, confusion. Then, something underneath both of those. Something I had never seen on his face in 41 years of looking at it. Something unguarded and raw and almost frightened. He said, she's lying. He stepped forward. He said, after everything I gave that girl, everything I sacrificed, she sends me 1 cent like I'm nothing. I used my command voice. The one that carries over flight line noise at 200 feet. Not raised. Not emotional. Just precise and absolute. I said, "Step back." He stepped back. Not because he wanted to. Because that voice is not a voice you choose to ignore when it comes from the right place. I said, "Get off my property." The officers moved. One on each side of him. Not physically directing him, just present, which is often sufficient. My father walked toward his car. At the curb, he turned. He had one hand on the door. He looked at me with the expression of a man who has lost a situation he was certain he controlled and has not yet identified whose fault that is. He said, "You think that rank makes you something?" I was standing on my front porch. My neighbors were on their lawns. The lights were still going. I said, "No, Dad. It just means I earned what I have." He got in his car. As he pulled away, I watched him pick up his phone. I went inside. James made coffee. We sat at the kitchen table and didn't speak for several minutes. That is one of the things I love about him most. He understands the difference between silence that's empty and silence that's doing something necessary. Then I called Priscilla Hayward and told her to file immediately. Then I called Staff Sergeant Rutherford and reported the incident. Then I called my mother. She answered on the second ring. I said, "Mom, Dad drove 6 hours to file a false harassment report at my home. Prior to that, he came to my military installation and inquired about my movements. He sent a threatening letter to my rank and name at the base. I have all of it documented." Silence. I said, "I'm filing for a protective order tomorrow. I wanted you to know before it happens." Her voice, when it came, was very quiet. She said, "Adrienne, he loves you. He's just..." I said, "Mom." I stopped her gently, the way you stop someone who is about to walk into something without seeing it. I said, "I know he loves me in the way that he loves me. I am not arguing about love. I am telling you what he has done. Those are two different things and they can both be true at the same time." A longer silence. She said, "He was so hurt." About the penny. I thought about the 4 empty rows with white satin ribbons. I thought about the hotel bathroom floor at midnight. I thought about the text at 7:52 in the morning after the most important day of my life, asking me for $12,000 for my brother's party. I said, "Goodbye, Mom. I love you." I hung up. The protective order was granted on a Friday morning by Judge Lorraine Osei, Chatham County Superior Court, who reviewed Priscilla Hayward's submission and issued a 2-year order requiring Raymond Calloway to maintain a minimum distance of 500 feet from my person, my residence, and my place of duty. The false report filing generated a formal citation and a notation in the county system. Officer Rivera had filed her own detailed incident report, including the banking evidence captured on her body camera and a summary of my father's behavior when confronted with it. She was listed as a supporting witness. Staff Sergeant Rutherford's incident report from the base gate was submitted as well. 31 pages. His documentation noted that my father had sought information about the daily movements and building assignment of a commissioned officer, and that this created a record that could be pursued under federal statute if conduct continued. My father's attorney, a man in Baton Rouge named Clifton Farrow, who handled estate matters and had clearly not anticipated being involved in a federal security documentation situation, contacted Priscilla Hayward 3 weeks after the order was issued. He said his client wished to communicate regret and explore paths toward resolution. Priscilla called me. I looked out the window at the front yard. Normal. No lights. No neighbors at their doors. The cameras at the corners of the porch, their small lights blinking green. I said, "The order stands for its full term. Tell his client I wish him well. Tell him I'm not available for a conversation." Priscilla passed it along. The attorney did not call back. 6 weeks later, I heard from my cousin Nora, one of the 2 relatives who had sent a card to the wedding that said, "We're so sorry we can't be there, but we love you," that my brother Terrence's engagement party had not happened. The venue deposit had not been paid. The $12,000 my father had asked me for on the morning of my wedding had not materialized from any source. And Terrence's fiancée had, in the intervening weeks, communicated to Terrence that she was not prepared to get married into a family involved in a federal harassment matter connected to a military officer. The engagement was on pause. That was how Nora described it. On pause. She told me this with the slightly guilty tone of someone who is aware they're delivering information the other person is going to have complicated feelings about. I thanked her. I told her the gift card she'd sent had been used on champagne at the reception. That James and I had specifically toasted her. She laughed. The laugh of someone who needed permission to find something funny and had just been given it. She said, "Is there anything you need?" I said I'm good. And I was. That was the honest answer. Not because everything was resolved. Some things don't resolve. They settle into a shape you can live around. Not because the grief was gone. The grief of having a father who is capable of love and incapable of being a father is a specific and long-lasting kind of grief. It doesn't go away because a judge signed a document. But I was good. James and I spent the following Labor Day weekend at home. Not traveling. Not celebrating. Not performing anything for anyone. We ordered food on Saturday night and ate it on the back porch. The sky did what skies do in early September in Savannah, which is go colors that don't have names, something between gold and gray, and the particular blue that comes right before dark. I had my coffee. James had his. The cameras at the corners of the yard blinked their quiet green. Somewhere, my father was living his life, telling his version of events at church, at dinner parties, at whatever gathering was next for him. I didn't know what his version was. I didn't need to. I had the banking app. I had the body camera footage. I had the order. I had 31 pages of federal documentation. And I had this. A back porch. A husband who 9 years ago at a conference in Seattle asked me what I found hardest. A sky going colors I still haven't named. My father used to say that rank doesn't make you anything. That what makes a person is family. He wasn't entirely wrong about that last part. He just had the wrong idea about what family means. At what point does protecting your peace stop being selfish and start being survival? And is there a difference? Drop your thoughts below. I read every single one. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been the responsible one who was only remembered when someone needed something, share it with one person who needs to hear it today. New stories go up every day.